It is day 74 since the disappearance of Nancy Guthrie. Media outlets continue broadcasting outdated police reports regarding her timeline. A silent digital witness has just revealed a completely different sequence of events. The public narrative centers on a home invasion in Pima County. Investigators collected physical evidence from the property during the initial sweep. Medical records confirm the 84-year-old victim relies on a cardiac pacemaker. This medical device transmits operational data through a continuous Bluetooth connection. The connection relies entirely on proximity to a designated mobile phone. The digital log shows a precise disconnection at 2:30 in the morning. This timestamp creates a severe structural fracture in the official timeline. The mobile device remains in the custody of the Federal Bureau of Investigation. Law enforcement analysts are currently examining the internal storage of this specific phone. The device represents a medical black box for a missing elderly woman. We must ask what occurred during the 43 minutes of absolute silence before the signal dropped. The authorities are actively withholding this specific digital telemetry from public press conferences. You are watching an active forensic analysis on Tracking Evil with John. Make sure you subscribe to our ongoing coverage of this active investigation. We monitor every update as law enforcement attempts to locate the missing woman. Analyzing the newly discovered medical data requires a precise review of the established facts. The timeline begins on the evening of January 31. The location is a private residence located in Pima County. Tommaso Cioni provided the final confirmed visual identification of the victim. Law enforcement verified he dropped his mother-in-law at her residence at 9:48 that evening. Security footage confirms the garage door closed behind her 2 minutes later. The property remained undisturbed for nearly 4 hours, according to neighborhood surveillance. A security camera captured an unidentified suspect approaching the front perimeter at 1:47 in the morning. The footage shows a male subject wearing a hood and carrying an Ozark Trail 25-liter backpack. The intruder deliberately disabled the doorbell camera at that exact moment. This specific action initiated the kidnapping sequence, according to early police statements. Officers responded to the property and discovered a deeply concerning physical scene. The interior of the residence appeared completely organized with no signs of a physical struggle. Forensic testing confirmed the blood on the front porch belonged to Nancy Guthrie. The authorities treated the location as an active crime scene and secured the perimeter. That sequence of events represents the entirety of the public record released by the Pima County Police Department. Those established data points form the foundation of the conventional media coverage. We are now examining the specific electronic evidence the Federal Bureau of Investigation transported away from that secure perimeter. The physical crime scene tells a story of a rapid abduction. The digital crime scene contradicts that theory entirely. The local police department focused their initial press briefings on the visual evidence. They released the footage of the suspect and the details of his backpack to solicit public assistance. They confirmed the blood match through rapid DNA testing protocols. This created a narrative of a violent encounter occurring exactly when the camera went offline at 1:47. The medical telemetry creates an undeniable conflict with this established theory. Pacemakers record cardiac events and maintain synchronization with a host device. The synchronization requires a constant power supply and geographic proximity. The host device in this investigation is a standard smartphone left at the residence. The Federal Bureau of Investigation took possession of this phone during the primary search operation. The internal logs of that phone indicate a continuous connection with the pacemaker until 2:30. This means the victim remained within 30 feet of the device for 43 minutes after the suspect disabled the exterior camera. 43 minutes is an extensive duration for a home invasion. The lack of interior disturbance suggests the suspect did not spend this time searching the property. The suspect either incapacitated the victim immediately or maintained control over her in a static location within the house. The missing phone call record mentioned in the title of our investigation refers directly to this digital silence. The Federal Bureau of Investigation possesses the complete diagnostic log from that smartphone. They have not explained why the suspect remained inside the residence for nearly an hour. They have not explained how an elderly woman was removed from the property without disrupting the interior environment. The public needs to understand the gravity of this specific digital artifact. The phone is not merely a communication tool in this investigation. It is the only reliable witness to the final 43 minutes Nancy Guthrie spent in her home. The data extracted from that device will dictate the future direction of the search. A cardiac pacemaker is an implanted medical device designed to regulate physiological rhythms. Modern iterations of these devices function as continuous data transmitters. They utilize low-energy radio protocols to communicate with a designated external monitor. The external monitor in this specific investigation is a standard cellular telephone. The cellular telephone acts as a bridge between the internal medical hardware and a remote server. The transmission requires the host device to remain within a specific geographic radius. The maximum operational range for this specific frequency is approximately 30 feet. Physical obstructions like drywall or insulated doors degrade the signal integrity significantly. This means the patient must remain in close physical proximity to the cellular telephone to maintain the data stream. The cellular device was recovered from the primary residence by federal agents during their initial sweep. Forensic analysts extracted the synchronization logs directly from the hardware. The logs demonstrate a continuous data stream originating from the pacemaker throughout the evening. The data stream proves the victim and the cellular telephone were occupying the same localized space. The electronic handshake between the devices remained completely stable when the suspect arrived at the property. The security system recorded the suspect disabling the exterior visual monitor at 1:47 in the morning. The medical telemetry confirms the victim was still inside the residence at that exact moment. The synchronization log shows normal operational status for an extended period following the camera deactivation. The data stream did not experience any interruption or degradation during this initial phase. The connection remained perfectly stable until exactly 2:30 in the morning. The digital log registers a complete and permanent severance of the wireless connection at that precise minute. The severance indicates the physical distance exceeded the 30-foot operational threshold. The cellular telephone never moved from its resting place inside the residence. This confirms the victim was physically transported outside the signal perimeter at 2:30. The 43 minutes between the camera deactivation and the signal loss represent a critical forensic window. The low-energy protocol mini packets of data at regular intervals. These intervals are called advertising events within the network architecture. The smartphone listens for these advertising events continuously. Each successful reception updates the timestamp in the application database. Federal agents extracted this exact database file using specialized forensic extraction tools. The extraction process preserves the cryptographic integrity of the original timestamps. This prevents any defense attorney from questioning the validity of the digital evidence in a future legal proceeding. The data points form an unbroken chain of presence from the moment the garage door closed at 9:50 in the evening. The chain remained unbroken when the doorbell camera was manually deactivated at 1:47. The intruder was inside the perimeter, while the pacemaker continued broadcasting its routine physiological metrics. The metrics include heart rate variations and battery voltage levels. The authorities have not disclosed if the physiological metrics indicate a state of elevated stress during the 43-minute window. A sudden spike in the recorded heart rate would provide direct evidence of a violent confrontation or extreme psychological terror. The withholding of this specific physiological data is a standard tactical decision by federal investigators. They retain certain data points to verify the authenticity of future confessions or informant testimony. The establishment of this 43-minute window creates a severe cognitive dissonance with the known physical evidence. The suspect arrived with a large 25-liter backpack indicating logistical preparation. He possessed the physical capacity to remove the 84-year-old victim immediately. He instead chose to linger inside a potentially compromised environment. 43 minutes provides ample opportunity for a neighbor to notice unusual activity. 43 minutes increases the probability of a random police patrol driving past the residence. The suspect accepted these significant operational risks for an unknown operational benefit. The law enforcement profile of this individual must account for this extreme tolerance for risk. We must analyze what specific actions could occupy 3/4 of an hour in a silent house. The suspect might have conducted a methodical search for specific documents or valuables. The suspect might have engaged in a prolonged psychological interaction with the victim. The suspect might have utilized this time to stage the scene or alter physical evidence before Departure. The neatness of the interior environment contradicts the theory of a frantic search. A methodical search by an unknown intruder usually leaves subtle indicators of displacement. The crime scene technicians reported a completely undisturbed living space. This indicates the suspect either knew exactly where to find his objective or had no material objective at all. The chilling reality is that the suspect spent 43 minutes simply waiting in the dark with his victim. This calculation transforms the case from a standard abduction into a highly specialized psychological event. The investigators are currently attempting to map out any conceivable activity that fits this specific time frame. We encourage our viewers to analyze this 43-minute gap carefully. You can provide your analytical theories regarding the suspect and his timeline in the discussion section below. Your logical deductions often highlight variables that traditional investigative models might temporarily overlook. The interaction between the suspect and the victim during this period remains the absolute core of the mystery. The suspect successfully controlled an 84-year-old woman without creating any environmental chaos. The suspect managed to execute a silent extraction at 2:30 in the morning. The digital connection severed completely as the victim was moved beyond the 30-foot transmission boundary. The cellular telephone remained on the table as a silent monument to the abduction. The federal agents processing the scene understood the profound implications of that solitary device. The device contained the irrefutable mathematical proof of the delay. The delay suggests the abduction itself might have been a secondary objective to an unknown primary goal. The investigators must determine why the suspect needed those 43 minutes before initiating the extraction. The answer to that specific query will likely identify the individual responsible for the intrusion. The suspect operated with a chilling level of situational awareness. He identified the exterior surveillance node and neutralized it instantly. He then entered the structure and established control over the elderly occupant. The 25-liter backpack suggests he anticipated carrying substantial items away from the location. A backpack of that specific volume can hold approximately 50 pounds of material. The neatness of the house indicates he did not fill the backpack with random household valuables. He either brought specialized equipment into the house or removed highly specific targeted items. The physical profile of the suspect matches an individual capable of sustained physical exertion. He carried the backpack and managed the extraction of the 84-year-old victim simultaneously. The departure at 2:30 implies a carefully calculated exit strategy. The streets of Pima County experienced their lowest volume of vehicular traffic between 2 and 3 in the morning. The suspect utilized this optimal window of minimal civilian movement to execute the final phase of his operation. The severed wireless connection is the starting pistol for the active abduction phase. The 43 minutes of preparatory silence remain the most disturbing element of the entire sequence. We invite our audience to evaluate the logistical requirements of managing a hostage in a residential environment. Submit your analytical conclusions regarding the suspect behavior during this static period in the comments section. The collective intelligence of our viewing community frequently identifies patterns hidden within these isolated data points. The suspect believed his methodology was flawless and untraceable. He failed to account for the silent medical sentry operating inside the chest of his victim. The pacemaker log is the single piece of evidence that disrupts his intended operational timeline. The investigation now pivots on understanding the psychological motivation behind the delay. The individual who orchestrates a 43-minute delay is not a chaotic, opportunistic offender. He is a methodical operator executing a predetermined sequence of events. We will continue analyzing every fragment of verified data to construct a psychological profile of this methodical operator. The exterior porch holds physical evidence that directly contradicts the digital timeline. Investigators discovered a distinct pattern of biological material near the front entryway. Rapid diagnostic protocols confirmed the biological substance consisted of human blood. Laboratory technicians matched the genetic profile directly to the missing 84-year-old victim. This forensic confirmation establishes a baseline of physical trauma occurring at the residence. The location of the biological evidence creates a severe analytical paradox. The blood was located outside the primary structural envelope of the house. The interior of the residence presented a completely different forensic environment. Crime scene analysts reported the indoor environment appeared completely organized and undisturbed. They found no physical indicators of a violent struggle or forced extraction. The furniture remained in standard configurations without any signs of displacement. The floor surfaces lacked the typical scuff marks associated with physical altercations. The ambient environment suggested a normal evening rather than an active crime scene. We must reconcile this pristine interior with the biological evidence found outside. We must also integrate the 43-minute gap established by the medical telemetry. The intruder disabled the exterior surveillance node at 1:47 in the morning. The digital tether between the medical implant and the telephone severed at 2:30. The victim remained inside the residence for nearly 3/4 of an hour. The neatness of the interior environment complicates every standard abduction hypothesis. A violent confrontation inside would inevitably disturb the physical surroundings. An 84-year-old individual facing a masked intruder would naturally attempt evasion or physical resistance. Such resistance leaves microscopic and macroscopic evidence across the immediate residential environment. The absence of this evidence implies a highly controlled extraction process. The suspect maintained complete physical and psychological dominance over the elderly victim. The suspect achieved this dominance without resorting to environmental destruction or chaos. The 43 minutes could represent a period of calculated psychological subjugation. The intruder might have utilized chemical restraints to ensure absolute physical compliance. Law enforcement has not disclosed whether they found evidence of pharmacological agents. The blood on the exterior porch suggests the physical trauma occurred during the departure. The suspect successfully navigated the interior without causing any physical injury to the victim. The transition through the exterior threshold initiated the sequence leading to blood loss. The federal profile of this suspect must reflect this stark environmental dichotomy. The suspect demonstrates the capacity for meticulous interior control followed by exterior violence. The investigators are analyzing the specific volume and dispersal pattern of the blood. The dispersal pattern can indicate the exact mechanism of the physical injury. A low-velocity drop pattern suggests a passive bleeding source during transport. A high-velocity spatter pattern would indicate active blunt force trauma during the exit. The authorities have classified the specific nature of the blood evidence as protected information. This classification prevents public contamination of the ongoing forensic analysis and future interrogations. The analytical community must focus on the established facts regarding the spatial distribution. The spatial distribution confirms the residence served as a static holding area. The 43-minute holding period remains the most critical vulnerability in the timeline. The suspect accepted massive operational exposure by remaining inside the illuminated structure. The suspect believed his methodology mitigated the risk of external observation. The suspect failed to anticipate the continuous digital recording of the medical hardware. The medical hardware documented his exact presence and his exact moment of departure. The digital timestamp of 2:30 provides a definitive launch point for the exterior search. The search parameters must account for the physical capabilities of an encumbered suspect. The suspect carried a 25-liter tactical backpack alongside the victim. This physical burden significantly limits the initial velocity of the escape vector. The suspect likely utilized a secondary staging area or a concealed transportation asset. The investigators are actively mapping all potential vehicular access points near the property. They are calculating the maximum pedestrian range for an individual carrying substantial weight. The analysis of this escape vector requires a methodical review of all surrounding environmental data. The timeline contains a secondary vulnerability occurring hours before the camera deactivation. The established chronology identifies the final confirmed visual contact with the victim. The son-in-law transported the victim to her primary residence that evening. The police reports confirm he facilitated the drop-off at 9:48. The security infrastructure recorded the garage door closing exactly 2 minutes later. The son-in-law departed the location without entering the primary living space. This logistical decision created a critical window of isolation for the elderly victim. Standard security protocols for vulnerable individuals usually mandate interior physical verification. The failure to clear the interior environment provided an unverified baseline for the evening. The authorities cannot definitively prove the residence was secure at 9:50. The intruder might have bypassed the perimeter before the victim arrived home. The intruder might have utilized the victim as an access mechanism to the interior. The investigation must maintain multiple parallel hypotheses regarding the initial point of entry. The timeline fragmentation is further complicated by digital interference from external actors. Federal agents intercepted 3 separate communications directed to a major media outlet. The communications contained explicit extortion demands regarding the missing 84-year-old woman. The author demanded a substantial financial transfer utilizing decentralized cryptocurrency networks. The communications incorporated specific theological references and biblical quotations throughout the text. The inclusion of religious ideology often indicates a severe psychological pathology. Federal cybercrime units initiated a comprehensive trace of the digital origins. The tracing operation identified a suspect residing within the state of California. The authorities executed a tactical operation and secured the California suspect. The subsequent interrogation revealed the individual possessed no physical connection to the Arizona crime scene. The individual was operating as an opportunistic extortionist exploiting the public tragedy. This digital interference consumed valuable federal resources during the most critical search window. The extortionist directed investigative momentum away from the primary geographical zone. The presence of opportunistic actors highlights the chaotic environment surrounding high-profile disappearances. The investigators must continually separate verified physical evidence from fabricated digital noise. The fabricated noise obscures the fundamental mechanics of the actual abduction. The primary suspect operated with a chilling level of physical precision in Pima County. The primary suspect left a pristine interior environment and a single biological trace outside. We must synthesize the early departure of the family member with the midnight intrusion. We must isolate the 43 minutes of interior silence from the California extortion attempt. Your continuous engagement with Tracking Evil with John ensures you receive these vital analytical distinctions. Subscribing to our platform guarantees you access to verified forensic breakdowns as they emerge. We have an unverified timeline, a biological anomaly, and a neutralized digital distraction. These elements create a complex matrix of overlapping contradictions and investigative dead ends. The authorities are navigating this matrix while withholding specific categories of physical evidence. They are waiting for the suspect to reveal knowledge only the perpetrator could possess. The suspect believes he executed a sterile operation without leaving a genetic signature. The suspect believes the disabled camera protected his identity from law enforcement. The suspect might be entirely unaware of a microscopic failure at the point of entry. A son-in-law who departed prematurely, and an extortionist motivated by religious delusion. We have an invisible intruder who operated in silence for 43 minutes. These individuals all command significant investigative attention and public scrutiny. They might all represent elaborate distractions from a singular piece of physical evidence. This evidence was reportedly abandoned directly within the visual field of the disabled camera. The next phase of our forensic analysis will examine this specific microscopic vulnerability. The federal authorities are currently withholding a specific microscopic vulnerability discovered at the crime scene. The exterior surveillance footage captured the suspect approaching the property at 1:47 in the morning. Analysts reviewing the high-definition video identified a highly specific behavioral adaptation utilized by the intruder. The suspect required both hands to disable the exterior camera and manage the 25-liter backpack. He compensated for this logistical limitation by securing a small illumination device directly between his teeth. Independent forensic analysts reviewing the release footage identified the object as a tactical bite flashlight. This specific methodology is commonly utilized by individuals operating in dark environments requiring bilateral manual dexterity. The suspect carried this object in his mouth during the approach and the subsequent camera deactivation. The suspect allegedly abandoned this specific piece of equipment within the immediate vicinity of the primary residence. The presence of a bite flashlight at a crime scene represents a catastrophic failure of operational security. A device held entirely within the human mouth for an extended duration becomes saturated with biological material. Saliva contains a massive concentration of epithelial cells shed continuously from the interior mucosal lining. The friction caused by gripping the hardened casing with human teeth accelerates the cellular shedding process. These epithelial cells provide a pristine source of cellular material for advanced genetic sequencing and profiling. Forensic genealogy experts emphasize that a bite flashlight provides a significantly higher genetic yield than standard touch evidence. Touch DNA requires the transfer of microscopic skin cells through brief physical friction against a surface. Salivary transfer involves the direct deposition of fluid heavily concentrated with intact cellular structures. The laboratory technicians processing this specific artifact would easily secure a complete and definitive genetic profile. The polymerase chain reaction process allows forensic scientists to amplify even minimal amounts of this collected cellular material. A complete profile allows investigators to search both national criminal databases and public genealogical repositories for familial matches. The timeline of this investigation reveals a profound contradiction regarding this specific piece of biological evidence. The abduction of the 84-year-old victim occurred 74 days ago, according to the official timeline. Federal laboratories possess the technological capacity to process and identify a high-yield genetic sample within 48 hours. The rapid DNA protocols utilized on the porch blood demonstrate their ability to accelerate standard testing procedures. The authorities have maintained absolute silence regarding the genetic results derived from the abandoned illumination device. This prolonged silence from the federal agencies creates two distinct analytical pathways for independent case reviewers. The first pathway suggests the extracted genetic profile does not currently exist within any national criminal database. This scenario indicates the suspect possesses no prior felony convictions or documented interactions with law enforcement agencies. A profile absent from the criminal registry forces investigators to utilize complex genealogical tracing techniques. Genealogical tracing requires extensive familial mapping across multiple generations and can consume months of specialized analytical resources. Analysts must navigate complex privacy regulations and piece together distant genetic relatives to isolate the primary suspect. The second pathway presents a significantly more disturbing tactical scenario regarding the federal investigative strategy. The authorities might have already identified the suspect through the rapid processing of the salivary evidence. They might be utilizing this prolonged silence as an intentional operational tactic to monitor the identified individual. Prematurely announcing a genetic match would immediately alert the suspect and potentially endanger the missing victim. Law enforcement agencies frequently employ this specific methodology during active kidnapping scenarios to prevent suspect escalation. They maintain covert surveillance on the primary target while attempting to locate the secondary holding location. The suspect currently believes his identity remains protected by the darkness and the disabled surveillance equipment. He might continue operating under the assumption that the 43-minute interior gap provided absolute operational security. He fails to recognize that the biological material deposited on the illumination device completely nullifies his precautions. We must analyze whether the federal silence represents an investigative dead end or a highly coordinated tactical maneuver. Share your analytical assessment regarding the forensic implications of the Byte flashlight in the engagement section below. Do you believe the suspect remains unidentified or is currently operating under covert federal observation? We continuously monitor these specific forensic variables to provide you with the most accurate analytical projections. The resolution of this investigation will ultimately depend on the microscopic cells left behind in the dark. The current operational status of the investigation requires a completely objective assessment of the verified data points. We must acknowledge that the primary objective of locating the missing 84-year-old woman remains unfulfilled today. The federal authorities recently executed a high-profile arrest in the state of California regarding this case. The arrested individual faces severe federal charges related to digital extortion and the transmission of interstate threats. The investigation confirmed this individual operated independently and possessed no physical proximity to the primary crime scene. The California suspect merely exploited the public vulnerability of the family to execute a decentralized financial fraud. This arrest resolves the digital interference, but provides no actionable intelligence regarding the actual physical abduction. The primary suspect who disabled the camera at 1:47 in the morning remains unidentified and unlocated. The federal task force continues to classify this event as an active and prioritized missing persons investigation. The classification guarantees the continuous allocation of federal resources and specialized analytical units to the regional command center. We must evaluate the specific physiological vulnerabilities of the victim as the timeline extends beyond 70 days. The missing woman relies on a cardiac pacemaker that requires regular monitoring and specific medical oversight. The disconnection of the medical telemetry at 2:30 in the morning severed her primary health monitoring system. She also requires a specific daily pharmaceutical regimen to maintain her cardiovascular stability and overall physiological health. The suspect must secure these specific pharmaceutical compounds to maintain the viability of his hostage over an extended period. The acquisition of specialized cardiovascular medications requires either a legitimate medical prescription or access to illicit distribution networks. Federal investigators routinely monitor regional pharmacies and medical distribution centers for unauthorized access to these specific compounds. The authorities track anomalies in prescription fulfillment patterns that might indicate a secondary supply line being established. The suspect increases his operational exposure every time he attempts to procure these necessary medical supplies. The alternative scenario is profoundly grim and represents the worst possible statistical outcome for an elderly hostage. If the suspect fails to provide the necessary medical support, the physiological status of the victim will rapidly deteriorate. The authorities understand that the biological clock operates entirely independently of their forensic analysis and tactical deployments. They are executing localized grid searches based on the geographical data extracted from the abandoned cellular device. They are analyzing the precise triangulation of the Bluetooth signal immediately before the permanent disconnection occurred. This analytical process defines the maximum possible transit radius from the moment the connection failed at 2:30. The public remains an essential component of this ongoing investigative architecture despite the passage of time. The suspect exists within a specific community and exhibits specific behavioral changes following the execution of this crime. The suspect might display an unexplained influx of financial resources or an unusual obsession with the ongoing media coverage. The authorities require the civilian population to identify these subtle behavioral deviations within their immediate social circles. We must remember that the pristine condition of the interior environment suggests the suspect possesses an exceptional degree of psychological control. This level of control often translates into a superficially normal public persona that effectively deflects casual suspicion. The public must look beyond superficial normality and report any circumstantial anomalies to the federal authorities immediately. The investigation stands at a critical intersection between advanced forensic technology and fundamental human observation. The 43 minutes of silence inside the residence remain the most significant psychological barrier to resolving this case. The suspect utilized that precise window of time to execute a highly complex extraction without alerting the surrounding environment. The answers to this mystery are encoded within the biological material on the flashlight and the digital logs. The suspect believes the passage of 74 days diminishes the probability of his eventual identification and capture. Forensic science operates on a permanent timeline where microscopic evidence never degrades or forgets its biological origin. The 84-year-old woman is still out there, separated from her medication and her vital medical telemetry. The integration of advanced medical technology into daily life creates an unintentional surveillance network. What this case teaches us about personal security involves the concept of the digital witness. Human memory remains notoriously unreliable under the extreme physiological stress of a violent encounter. Eyewitness testimony frequently fails forensic scrutiny during rigorous cross-examination in federal court proceedings. The digital witness operates entirely outside the boundaries of human emotion and biological fear. The cardiac pacemaker inside the chest of Nancy Guthrie felt no terror that morning. The microprocessors merely recorded the electrical impulses of her heart and transmitted the data. The smartphone resting on the table blindly accepted the incoming packets of medical telemetry. These interconnected devices formed an invisible perimeter of data collection around the elderly victim. The intruder focused his situational awareness entirely on the exterior visual monitoring systems. He successfully disabled the camera without realizing the interior space was constantly broadcasting information. The modern residential environment functions as an interconnected web of active and passive sensors. Smartwatches monitor sleep cycles, and home assistants listen for specific auditory activation triggers. Refrigerators track inventory while robotic vacuums map the exact square footage of the property. The criminal element has historically adapted their methodologies to bypass physical locks and alarms. The digital age requires the criminal operator to possess a comprehensive understanding of data transmission. The individual who abducted the 84-year-old victim lacked this specific technical sophistication. The failure to secure the mobile device provided investigators with an absolute temporal anchor. The timestamp of 2:30 in the morning cannot be intimidated or coerced into changing. It stands as a definitive mathematical fact within a chaotic landscape of unverified theories. This teaches us that true anonymity no longer exists within the modern technological ecosystem. The devices we carry document our movements and record our physiological baselines with absolute precision. This continuous data generation provides law enforcement with an unprecedented tool for post-incident reconstruction. The digital footprint ensures that even an invisible suspect leaves a measurable mathematical trail. This undeniable reality shifts the advantage back toward the forensic investigators analyzing the scene. The authorities utilize these digital fragments to build an inescapable perimeter around the suspect. Physical escape from the residence merely initiated a prolonged digital pursuit across multiple networks. Every intersection camera and cellular tower becomes an extension of the original crime scene. The suspect is currently attempting to outrun a technological dragnet designed to process infinite variables. The mathematical reality of this investigation circles back to a single residential living space. We return to the overwhelming psychological weight of those specific 43 silent minutes. The exterior camera went completely dark at 1:47 in the morning. The digital connection severed exactly 3/4 of an hour later at 2:30. The elderly victim sat in the darkness alongside a highly prepared tactical intruder. The biological material resting on the abandoned Byte flashlight holds the key to his identity. The federal agencies are methodically processing this microscopic evidence while maintaining strict operational silence. The physical absence of the 84-year-old woman remains the most critical priority. She was removed from her secure environment without her necessary daily pharmaceutical support. We will cover every development as the federal forensic laboratories release their final genetic determinations. The data extracted from the abandoned cellular telephone continues to guide the regional grid searches. We rely on the analytical capabilities of our viewing community to process these forensic variables. We will analyze every subsequent press release and every leaked document regarding this specific timeline. The authorities will eventually utilize the biological evidence to identify the individual responsible for this complex operation. The investigative task force understands that the biological clock of the victim is rapidly depleting. Make sure you subscribe to Tracking Evil with John to receive immediate notification of these updates. The digital silence at 2:30 in the morning marked the beginning of a prolonged nightmare. 43 minutes in the dark changed the trajectory of multiple lives without a single sound. A flashlight containing genetic material waits in an evidence locker for a conclusive database match. A cellular telephone holds the final recorded heartbeats of a missing elderly woman. I am John, and the hunt for the truth in this case will absolutely continue.